This is Rob Liefeld. Kai Review is going down.
Hey guys, just finished watching Pennyworth, Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot. Wow, what an interesting show. So this show is really kind of interesting. It's really different than any of the other DC shows, Marvel shows, or anything like that. There's nothing really I could kind of compare it to other than the closest thing I could think that I could compare this to is pretty much like the Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, and I think it's kind of quite similar to that. It is the closest thing I can put it to. I mean, it's a very different show, but it still has the same aesthetic, obviously, with the whole London and all that stuff, and I think it kind of plays in and kind of like the way things are kind of going. Even some of the theme music and stuff seems very kind of derivative of that and kind of using some of that, and I think that's kind of interesting, especially since obviously Batman is the world's greatest detective, so you take the detective music from Sherlock and put on his mentor Alfred, right? And I think that's really kind of interesting kind of similarities there. They're trying to kind of show the difference, right? Subtle nods there to detectives and stuff. So I think that was really cool. We start off this episode with we see him, we first meet Alfred and we see him, and he has like all kinds of scars, and he's been through war, and he has kind of all kinds of flashbacks throughout this episode. And I was kind of thinking, like, should they have gone with and started the show, show him in the war? And I think I kind of would have liked to have seen that, just because he's not just a regular soldier. He wasn't just a regular soldier. He was actually part of the ASS. So that would have been something cool to have seen to see him progress and get up to that status of ASS, see him throughout the ranks. Maybe we jump in and he's already been in the war for a couple of years, and he's been a regular stuff, and we start to see him slowly jump ranks and stuff. That could have been interesting, at least starting the first season, seeing him becoming in the war and stuff, and becoming the ASS, joining that. I think those could have been quite an interesting mission, showing those missions and stuff. But I think I definitely can't wait to see as to where things kind of go with that. But I think the way they're doing it with flashbacks and him getting PTSD and stuff, they could later on at some point, maybe in this season or next season, they could do some sort of thing where they have the missions that he did as ASS, have some of those things come back to haunt him, and then we have to go dive into those storylines as to what he did as ASS but over in the war. I think those things would be quite interesting to play with, and there's potentially a way for them to do that by having some of that kind of come back to haunt him type thing in some way type thing. So it definitely was really cool. We see Alfred and Thomas Wayne meet early on, and that's kind of quite interesting, playing with that. It allows them, I guess, to kind of skirt really close to the crime alley scene type thing, the Batman, the moment Batman was born, right, type thing. I think that was kind of interesting. They could go really close to that without actually going there. So you could always have characters that later, if they wanted to, kind of like Gotham. Gotham starts off very much as a gangster show and not really kind of a comic book show, and this one kind of feels like that too so far. It's starting off very much as a British spy thriller, a bit British action thriller type thing. Pretty much this episode is a British version of Taken, is what it kind of feels like, type thing. So I think that's kind of interesting with that. So they could play with that and then slowly lead this later on into something like Gotham, where you start to have, characters from the comics. Maybe you have someone like Ra's al Ghul. He should definitely be alive, although the kind of older Batman villains that could definitely be around. Maybe you have Penguin at some point. I mean, they've already done Penguin on Gotham, so I doubt that they would want to do that. Or if they did, it'd be such a complete different version of him that it'd be kind of nothing like him whatsoever. But the idea is still kind of there. They could always bring in some of these older villains that would technically still be born in the 60s when this show looks like it's taking place. So I think that's going to be fun to see as to where things kind of go with that. We see Thomas Wayne, we find out that he has deadly info and stuff. And we find out that he's kind of mixed up in the middle of a civil war between the British governments and stuff, and that was kind of interesting with that. And then we get a 2 weeks later jump, and I think that was really kind of interesting with that. And I think that was a good idea, putting that 2 weeks later. At first I thought, oh, what? And then when it happened, then it makes kind of sense that just, all the things that they do, by putting that in, I think it made more sense that it would have been too convenient for them to just kind of, all that stuff to happen so close to each other type thing. And I think it was kind of interesting to see as to kind of where things go with that 2 week break, because we see that the bad guys, the Black Ravens, Black Crows, they end up kidnapping Esme so that they can force, Alfred to go and find Thomas Wayne. What's something I'd like to get into and kind of get to see an explanation for as to what was Thomas Wayne doing for the 2 weeks, because we saw that 2 weeks earlier he got shot at, and he was on the phone with his mother, and the place just got all shot at. And then we jumped 2 weeks, and the bad guys were still not able to find him. They were able to find him the first time, but why weren't they able to find him the second time? Why did it take him 2 weeks? Why after 2 weeks they figured, we can't find him, let's hire someone else who's better at finding him, to find, someone who's met him before, to maybe find him again. So I think that was kind of interesting as how they went there with that. But I want to know as to, how does Thomas Wayne have any skills that was able to, how did he hide? Where did he hide for the past 2 weeks? I mean, we saw that where he hid type thing, but how did the bad guys not able to find him? If Alfred was able to find him so easily, then how come the bad guys weren't able to find him? Is he a bit of a spy too type thing? I think that would be something cool to kind of play into and kind of dive into that, just seeing as to a bit more of his background and story. So that's something there that I kind of either missed it myself, or they need to just explore in his background. So we see Alfred at one point at the end of the episode. We see him. He's breaking through the looks like it's the Queen's Gambit or type thing, or one of the Queen's Gambit, one of the palaces and stuff in the government, and he's kind of going through knocking people out. He has his handgun, and he's going around and knocking people out with his gun instead of shooting them, which I understand. He wants to save bullets and all that stuff. You need to do that, and he doesn't want to kill anyone. But at the same time, he could still, it just seems a bit silly that you're knocking all these guys out with this gun. They're going to get up and get back. Yes, you're hitting them really hard, but it's still just a small handgun, so you need to get really close to doing that. It's not like you have a long shotgun with a long reach to hit someone with, instead of just shooting them, or shooting them in the foot and then grabbing their stuff. That just seems a bit kind of, all the upper hand. He has to get really close to them to really hit them in the head with, knock them out cold with a handgun, rather than just kind of shooting them in the foot, or shooting them in the foot, then knocking them out afterwards, and then taking their own gun type thing. So that was just kind of a bit silly there, that the guys would get knocked out and not get up after getting hit once by a handgun. Yeah, cool, they'd probably get knocked out, but I feel like after 5 minutes they'd all get up, and then by the time he got to Esme, they would all be out there surrounding that building, or at least a lot of them would be, because they just get back up. Because by the time you knock out one guy, and then you knock out another 10 guy, that first guy is already up, already getting up, and that's something that they need to kind of do. That's something that the Daredevil show did very, very well with, knock a guy out, he gets back up after a while, because one punch to the head doesn't not usually knock out someone, especially when they're hyped up on adrenaline like that. So I think that would be something cool they need to play with. We see Alfred at the end of the episode gets a medal from the Queen, and she tells him to not tell anyone about the kind of civil war going on inside. So I think that's really going to be quite interesting to see as to where things kind of go, with a bit of a political civil war spy thriller genre type thing. And I think this is going to be quite interesting to see as to where things kind of go with that. And then eventually kind of, I don't know if this show, I'd like to see the show slightly, maybe not as much as Gotham did, because Gotham literally took place in Gotham. So of course it was going to go completely dark and comic booky and all that stuff. But I feel like this show could, maybe a little bit, because right now it just feels like a political action thriller, which is still kind of fun. But I'd like to see it to kind of slightly go with just a touch more, and we'll have to wait and see. It's only the first episode, but I'd turn up the dial just a little bit more on comic booky. Maybe have someone at some point hire a classic Batman villain, or a precursor to classic Batman villain, and you can kind of get a tease for something like that. Could be quite fun if someone hires one of them. So let me know what you think, guys. Put this episode in the comments below if you watched it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.
We're here for Kyle Reviewed on YouTube, the very best Kyle Reviewed channel on all the YouTube Kyle Reviewed channels. You got that? You got that right? Thank you for watching Kyle Reviewed. Deadpool and I thought it was fantastic. You need to like, you need to subscribe. You know how it's done. Like, subscribe. Right, DP? All right, Kyle Reviewed. Cool channel.